the animals taught me that they, especially our pets, they want to help us. They're here for us. So we're sort of like their assignment. So they taught me very early on that they choose us to help us in specific ways, their personalities, even past experiences that the animals have had that maybe, inflicted some kind of emotional wound on them. It's an agreement they'd make so that they can come to us and then help us heal from that same wound.
Well, I would like to welcome to Fear Unzipped, a wholehearted welcome to Kathy Van Gilder, who is an animal communicator. This is something that thrills me beyond belief. I love my animals. I love all animals, wild and domestic. So, Kathy, I want to dive right into this. And, we're talking about fear on this podcast. And I think it's really important to talk about our animals and the fears that they might have. And I know that they might have fears about us. So, before we get into it, can you tell me what your life was like before you actually came out and said, I'm an animal communicator? And then what happened after?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've always been able to communicate with animals ever since I was a young child. Um, with that said, I grew up in a family that was very afraid of anything beyond the five senses. So that put a little bit of a challenge in that. Um, so I learned to kind of walk on both sides, to pretend that I didn't have the special connection, but then I did have the special connection. So, yeah, so there was, and eventually what happened was I closed down. I stopped listening to the animals as an adolescent, right around that time, and just closed the door on my intuition and all of that, and let that go. Pursued a career in healthcare, and it wasn't. It was passionate at first, and I'm someone like a lot of people. My work has to be passionate, and it just kind of dwindled. It just sort of wasn't so exciting after a bit. But I was in the wellness disease prevention field, so I started exploring the mind, body, spirit connection. And that was exciting to me and awesome. But in healthcare, they weren't really quite ready to adopt that. Just wasn't quite the thing. So I tried to, get some messaging out there and all that. But I kept going deeper myself into my own, journey. And eventually a good friend of mine, told me about a spiritual healer and said, I think you might like him. And yeah, it was just what I needed. So he was kind of in essence, a spiritual garbage man. So he could clear up old baggage. And so I did a few sessions and it cleared up pretty quickly. Now, of course, that doesn't mean everything cleared up, but there was enough got cleared up so that, my third eye and my sensitivity came back in a really powerful way very quickly. And so that was awesome. But I didn't quite know what I was going to do with that. So I actually left my career in healthcare and did start working with humans and, just on a spiritual level. And I knew it wasn't quite the right thing. And I still hadn't quite opened to the animals yet either. I mean, my intuition was working great, but that just didn't come into my conscious awareness yet. So I one day saw an animal communicator on television. This was in the 90s at some point. And I had never seen an animal communicator in action before. And I'd heard about animal communicators. I didn't really know exactly what they did. And after seeing her, it just hit me so deeply. And then the memories, they started coming back about when I was a kid and how I could connect with the animals as well as all of nature intuitively, very easily. And so those memories came back, and it was just like, yeah, this is my calling. This is what I'm meant to do. My soul is meant to do. And so we had 3 animals at the time. We had a dog and 2 cats. And I started practicing on them because, it's been a long time and I was a kid. And typically, and at least for me, and I think this is true for a lot of people when they're young, when you communicate with animals, it's more effortless. It's just like, it's a back and forth kind of thing that it's like you don't even have to really focus. So my telepathy, my psychic ability when I was a kid, that's just how it worked. So I had, just to talk about that just briefly, I had a dog named Ginger, who was a Cairn Terrier when I was a kid. And I have a lot of memories of how we communicated effortlessly. And it's just one of those, it was telepathic, it just popped in all the messages, and she could understand me and I could understand her effortlessly. So that all started coming back, all those memories. So the memories started coming back, and as I started to practice with my own animals, how this exactly works, what kind of information do they have to share? And then I would start talking to the neighbors' animals, because of course I always had a connection with the animals. That never went away. I always loved them dearly, and they seemed to gravitate to me too. So, so this all made sense, when this all came about. So the animal friends I had in the neighborhood, I would communicate with them. I found out they wanted to talk a lot about their people, which was surprising to me at first. And then I started practicing with friends, animals, and just kind of grew from there. And eventually I became comfortable enough with it to start a business around that. So
I'm curious, did you have any fear around that going from the healthcare and then saying, I'm going to be an animal communicator and that's going to be my business? Did you feel, fear?
Of course. Yes, very much so. I mean, I was already sort of out psychically, because I had worked with people. But it's kind of interesting because I found, at least when I started, which was, it's over 20 years ago, so it's different now. People are different now. And I'm in the Midwest. I live in the Midwest. So it's just a little bit different way of thinking here. And so it was almost like people were more open to the human side and less open to the animal to some extent. And here's what the animals taught me right away. And this is the thing that people had a harder time digesting, that the animals taught me that they, especially our pets, they want to help us. They're here for us. So we're sort of like their assignment. So they taught me very early on that they choose us to help us in specific ways, their personalities, even past experiences that the animals have had that maybe, inflicted some kind of emotional wound on them. It's an agreement they make so that they can come to us and then help us heal from that same wound. It's very common that it happens that way. But they taught me about that. They taught me that they want to care for us, and that we've been so conditioned to believe that we need to care for we're responsible for them, and that they're not as smart as us. And what I found out was that they are incredibly evolved, and I see them as angelic souls. And so, their animals are more evolved than most humans. We can just sort of say it that way and put it out there, because it's true.
I would have to agree with you. I feel exactly the same way. My daughter had a dog, George, who transitioned a couple years ago. He was my soul. I'd say a soulmate of mine. I just adored him. And he was in a little accident when he was 1 year old, and he hit the wheel of a truck that was moving. And so he was never quite the same after that. But he was the dearest, sweetest person. I mean, I can't, I don't look at them as dogs or cats. It's just like a being that I've ever encountered, an unconditional love. So when an animal talks to you, can you give me an idea of what that's like? Because I think people are going to want to know, what are you hearing? Is it a knowing? Is it a whisper? Are they actually words?
Mm. Yeah. The animals communicate telepathically, but that can come through in a lot of different forms. And yes, it can come through as pictures. They do like to send pictures. It's a favorite of theirs. But it can come through as words, can come through as a feeling, as an emotion, as a smell, any of those things. They communicate they all communicate just a little bit differently. In essence, it's the same, but they have their preferred way. Just like we have preferred ways of using our intuition, it's the same thing. So I do private coaching for people to help them learn. I also offer courses too, but the private coaching is really awesome because, and this amazed me when I first started uncovering this and learning this, that the pets of the people who want to learn, they come in and they start doing the coaching and they say, okay, well, here's how I get the messages through. Here's how you receive the messages. And, here's your kind of, your strength. Here's your strength. And it could be a feeling. Sometimes they say, like I just had a client the other day who said, the dog said, I pop the message. I beam it into your head. That's what he said. I beam it into your head. So they communicate. However, they're so smart and brilliant that they know how to get those messages through the best way for their humans.
So they choose us. We're not choosing them. They are actually choosing us.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So, to elaborate on that, we may think, oh, we go to, we find a breeder and we find this awesome litter and we chose just the right one, or the breeder chose for us, or, whatever it might be. But they're always orchestrating that behind the scenes. So it's orchestrated on a soul level, a really deep level. I had a client the other day. This I thought was a really cool thing with who has a cat, and her husband had this kitty, and the kitty knew that the husband wasn't going to be on board with getting a cat, even though he kind of liked cats, but he's like, no. So they went to I think it was the Humane Society, and he was there, and he came and went directly to the husband. And so how this came about in the conversation was the woman said, oh no, he prefers my husband. And I said, no. And then she told me the story and I said, no, he says that he did that strategically to make sure to seal the deal.
So it's so brilliant. Truly.
It is.
What are some words of wisdom that the animals have taught you about being human and about navigating life?
Yeah. Our animals that live with us are really incredible teachers for daily life. And you may not necessarily think that would be true, but, it's perfect if you think about it. They live with us. They see us day to day. They know us better than any human, most likely. I mean, you can't lie to them. I always say that, you can't lie because they speak energy. Right. It's the energy, the language of energy, and energy doesn't lie. So they very often, well, almost all the time, will just want to help us navigate in daily life. So it can be things around, you're giving too much to a family member. And so they're concerned about that. So now so there's a couple different ways that they can communicate. Sandi, they can communicate through telepathic messages, but we don't always hear those, right? Yeah. It can, unless you're going through an animal communicator, or you've learned it yourself, or you just stayed in touch as a child and you know still how to do that. It can be very difficult. So one of the ways that they can communicate is, like I said, telepathically. But another way is if you're giving too much, very often, I've talked to so many animals that this is going on. They will stop eating. They may start vomiting. It's just what they're doing is they're absorbing our energy, and they're also giving us the message at the same time. They're very aware of what they're doing, but how they feel, just think about if you're an animal and you can't get your message through, and this message that's so incredible, a divine message, right? That's just of highest, form. And so they can't get it through. So they have to go to those measures and start doing things like that. So it's so very common. So it could be things about relationships. Maybe you're in the right relationship, and they make it very clear. I think we've all heard stories about that, where animals do that. They can make it very clear. I dislike that person. Not right for you. They just love to help us in our daily life. They can remind us that we're working too hard. Kitties are excellent at this. I mean, dogs are too, but our cats tend to lay on our computer, keyboard, when we need to take a break. They remind us they sit in our laps, just all sorts of ways. So they really just, the main message that it really comes down to really is about heart. Because, see, they've mastered how to live from their heart, and they know how that works. And they love us so deeply that they want to be able to teach us how to do the same. And they can feel and see how much suffering we're experiencing when we're not doing that, even though we're not aware of it a lot of times, right?
Exactly. So I've heard that animals our pets will take on our anxieties, will take on our fears, will take on our energy. And is there something that we should do when we're going through a traumatized time? Is there something we can do to calm the animals down as well? Because do we want them to take that on? What is that relationship?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and one I get asked a lot in some form. So, early on, when I first started communicating with animals, people would say, well, can you ask them, please don't take this on? And I thought, well, sure. And then I found out eventually it doesn't work, because again, if we're their assignment, right, it's kind of like they're our guardian angels, but in the flesh, right, here on earth, and we're not getting what we need to learn, they're not going to let up and say, oh, okay, sure, I won't bug you about that anymore. So the main thing that we can really do is to work on our own stuff. So,
which seems to me the lesson that they're teaching us is to raise our frequencies, live from the heart, start loving more and have more joy. The one thing that animals do, they make you laugh. They're just so silly, and they make you laugh, and it's so much joy. I just remember looking at George, and I would just, oh my gosh, I felt so much joy just being in his presence or looking in his eyes. It's so much fun. So they are teaching us to lighten up. Just don't be so human.
They do get puzzled by us. They're like, that crazy human. They love us, but wow, we don't understand that. That's crazy behavior. But yeah, and remember, because the personality, everything is orchestrated, right, to come in. So George, right, he had that personality that was very silly. He could be silly. He could engage you in a way that probably no one else could, to lighten your mood. And so I find that there's a lot of animals all have different personalities. Some love to be exactly what George does, which is to make you laugh and be silly, because what does that do? It connects us right back to our heart. And that's how we can connect with our animals. that's the best way we can connect with our animals is through our hearts. And when we are in our hearts we know, I think a lot of us know how that feels.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're there, you can feel the difference in the animal too. I was around an animal not too long ago, a dog who was very uptight and nervous, and he was with his human, and his human, he was protecting his human. Basically, that's what was going on. If you look at a deeper level, that's what was happening. So he was barking a lot and carrying on, and we were in a public setting, and I didn't say anything. I just started sending heart energy to him. Within 15 seconds, he had stopped barking. He was quiet, and everything shifted all around, and including his human. His human said, "Oh my goodness, wow, he feels lighter." She was holding him. And so why I'm bringing that up is it's just the power of connection with the heart is so incredible. And while he was taking on his human stuff, right? But that's where the barking was coming from and all that. Through that heart energy of just, kind of sending that heart energy to him and enveloping him with emerald green, beautiful heart energy, it calmed him down and came out of that for a bit.
So that's something each of us can do when our animals picking up on us and our anxiousness, or just, protecting us. And if a space is unfamiliar, we can just start giving them heart energy.
Yep.
It'd be a great exercise. Yeah.
Yeah. And remember what that does. It not only helps them, but what you're really doing is shifting yourself too.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So, because remember, if they're getting anxious about a new environment, most likely that's how you're feeling. And so
definitely, it makes me think of animals when they go to the vet and they start shaking. What is that all about? To me, they were fearful about being in that space, or they had a memory of that space, maybe getting a shot. I don't know.
It definitely can be some of that, but they live at a different frequency than we do.
Yeah.
Animals do. They're always connected to their higher self. So imagine that if we were always connected to our intuition and our heart, how differently we would walk through life. And so that's what they are. But I have a great story I can share with you about that.
Please.
Because I learned this firsthand with my kitty Cosmo a couple of years ago. And he had ended up with cystitis. And I'd never had a cat with cystitis before, so I was really unfamiliar with that. And he had been to the vet. We'd had him maybe a year, and he had been to the vet a time before, or a couple times actually. And he's a very calm cat. And he was very calm. But this time, and normally if I take my animals to the vet, I tell them where we're going, what we're doing. I make sure to ground myself because I'm not a fan, and so they pick up on that. But this time I was really worried about him, and I didn't do as much grounding. I didn't connect with him ahead of time, and I was anxious because I was like, wow, we found a little blood in the litter box, and I went into human panic a little bit. And so we went there, and he shook. I'd never seen him shake before. He shook and shook and shook. And he was cooperative, but he shook. I was like, oh, wow. So when we were all done and came home, I chatted with him, and he was like, yeah, you were, it was all your energy that was coming out of fear. And so then we went back for a follow-up, and it was the same kind of appointment, exactly the same, but instead I did some grounding and breathing ahead of time so that I wasn't afraid. And because we had to see, did it clear up, or was it okay? Completely different kitty. Calm, no shaking, relaxed, well, just looking out the window, doing whatever.
That's such a great story. Was Cosmo trying to tell you settle down a little bit? When he was shaking like that, is he actually communicating with you to tell you it's going to be okay, but just I need your energy to be more calm?
Yeah.
Is that it's not really about Cosmo being nervous, but just picking up on your energy?
Exactly. So there are these incredible mirrors. It's a mirror. And they're absorbers. So they're super sponges. So just think, those of us humans who are super duper sensitive and we live at a fairly high frequency, how much we absorb all the time. And so just imagine an animal who lives at a very high frequency and are very sensitive, how much they feel. So and when they're really, really connected to us, when we have this incredible bond, which we always do, yeah. So, and they do that out of love, and they do that consciously. They want to show us, here's what's playing out with you inside. Pay attention.
Kathy, I never put that together. And that, oh my gosh, what incredible words of wisdom for all of us. It's a synergy going on. I mean, I always know that we're connected, but I remember when George was shake at the vet and he was a little dog, that I actually, yes, it made me very anxious and worried about him. And I didn't want him to be sad. And so all I'm doing is contributing to his angst. It's like walking into a room and you know that there's an energy you don't want to be around because it's just with a human, it's just like, oh no, that's just too much. Or there's an energy that's just golden and beautiful and you gravitate and you say, oh my God, I want to be in that person's bubble. So what a great lesson for us. Thanks. Thanks for sharing that. I think that's really important. I wanted to ask you about, and it's a big topic, big emotional topic, when our sweet, angelic pets are ready to transition.
Yeah.
And many of us don't want to let go. And we hang on really tight. And I have to say, in George's case, it was so hard and probably waited too long. So how do we know what's the best timing and what are they trying to tell us?
Yeah, it's so much simpler than we think. So they know when they're ready. They know when their soul is being called back. They know also how painful it is for us to let go. But there's leeway there. So in other words, they hang on oftentimes for us because they want to make sure we're ready. Now, we're probably never ready, but more ready. We can be more ready. And so, there's animals who will hang on 6 months.
Yeah.
Just for that human. And they have surges, we see that. And that's because the soul knows, okay, can't quite leave yet. This human's not in a place where they can let go. So that's the thing. And they are never afraid to exit. They're not afraid to die because it's easy. There's an easy transition for them. And it's euphoric because they're going back home and it's a different energy. Now, that being said, it's important to say that it's not like they're just like, oh, well, bye. They don't feel, that's not what's going on. But they, when they transition, they're around still. And they try to get those messages through to you. They're just in a different vibration, frequency body. It's an energy body instead. And they still help. And often they come back. So there's so much there that we worry about. And the grief part is the grief. That's just part of being human and we can't avoid it. I feel it too when my pets leave. I have the advantage of being able to talk to them very easily once they cross over and to know their desires, when they're ready to leave. But just as everybody else, the grief is overwhelming when they leave. So that's the thing to remember, is that they want to work with you. They'll wait until you're more ready. So you never have to feel guilty about waiting too long.
Well, that's comforting. When you say they come back, do they come back as our next pet? Or in what ways do they come back?
Yeah, and it just all depends. It depends on the situation, and it's on a soul level, right? And so if they're needed again and it's an agreement, they will come back. And so often what I've learned from the animals anyway is that if you've got this incredible bond with them, we could call it a spirit animal. And those spirit animals tend to walk with us on the earth over and over and over again in many lifetimes, and also can come back in our same lifetime too. And so, yeah, so they can. And if they're not going to come back, at least now, let's say, and in the first couple of years or something like that, and if you really want another animal, they're going to orchestrate the perfect soul for you. And that happens all the time. I will talk to that animal that's crossed over and they have just gotten another pet, and they'll say, sometimes it's the same soul, and sometimes it's, well, your animal was very involved in this. Your dog was very involved and orchestrated the whole thing and made sure. I even had a dog tell me the other day he was orchestrating a new dog coming into these humans' lives, and he said, well, I talked you up to this other soul. And I loved that. I thought, oh wow. And this fit him, his personality. That is how he would talk. And so he prearranged and made sure, and they do that all the time. And it's so comforting, I think, to know that. And I think the other thing is that if that animal doesn't come back right away, or isn't planning on coming back during this lifetime, let's say, the amazing thing about that is if they do pick out another soul for you and they help orchestrate that, this soul is even better. And not better than the other, but better for you in this time, because they come in to help us with specific things. Whether it be a really big life challenge, whether it be to teach us something, whether it be we just need extra support during this time, whatever it might be. They also know about that too, and when the timing is that we need them.
It just sounds so perfect, doesn't it? I do remember when George transitioned and members of my family saw this, we would see like a shadow of him around the corner. And it happened constantly.
Yeah.
So, and it was very comforting. And I'd say, oh, there's George. There's George walking around the corner. So, and I've heard that's happened. But I mean, many people have said that.
Yeah. It's your clairvoyance. It's the corner of your eye, and you see them. Yeah. And they want you to be able to. Now, they're not going to frighten you if you're afraid of that. So they'll choose the best way. But yeah, very often they'll be seen. Sometimes people can feel them. I'll say, oh, they're laying on your chest. And oh, yeah, I feel that. Yep, that's who it is. Or, they can even bark telepathically. You can hear their bark telepathically. Or because, when I talk to the animals on the other side, they tell me all these things like, oh, it's my walking. They hear my walking, and they'll say, yeah, I do hear that.
That has definitely happened. Absolutely. In the bark, that's absolutely happened. Also, they can see beings that we can't see. In our home, there was a man who had passed away, and a beautiful soul. I mean, I can feel it's a beautiful soul. But George would go into the living room and just bark and stare at this one place and bark and bark and bark. And I felt like he was communicating with this gentleman. And what is your take on that, and what's your experience with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've talked to animals where it's a parent maybe who passed of a client, that I'm talking to, who's been kind of hanging out. I remember one time there was wind chimes, I think, going on at the same time. And they were like, what's the deal with the wind chimes? And then was like, oh, well, it's your mom. and and they're communicating. Yes, they definitely can sense, and they can see the other pets who crossed over, but they, right. And sometimes the being that's there may need to, have some resolution or something. And so the animal then sometimes they try to help with that.
To help move them on.
Yeah.
Yes.
And sometimes, like I remember not that long ago, I did a session with someone who the house had a lot of beings, a lot of not so great things that had happened there. And so this animal wouldn't go in the house. And they didn't know this, but I said, well, this is because of the energy in there. And the animal is saying you need to go get it cleared before he can go in there. And again, if you look at that take on that, the animal's really thinking about the humans and going, okay, this is not helpful for you. So we need to get this cleared. So I'm telling you, this is what's happening and we need to change this. So
Kathy, what are some things we can do to start this telepathic communication with our animals? Are there simple tools that we can do, strategies?
Yeah. Remember how I talked about the heart?
Mm-hmm.
The heart's so important. So the way I teach people is always through the heart. And so if we can connect with our heart, go into that heart chakra space, and most people know that as emerald green.
Okay.
Go in there, kind of picture yourself in emerald green. Even if you can't see it, it's okay. And then what I say is start sending that beautiful heart energy to your pet. Send that, and that'll keep that telepathic communication heart-based. And then it'll keep you free from your brain, starting to try to control, if you're hearing something or you're not understanding it, or you are understanding what they're saying, or and so you send that energy, and the first step is to try to feel, because they will, if you can feel their energy come back to you. Can you feel that love come back to you? And most people can, if they sit and just do that a couple times in a quiet space, and you're calm and your pet is calm, you'll start to feel that. And that's a really great introduction. Just to be able to feel their energy is a really big thing. The other way, and there's more to that, but another very simple thing that you can do is to connect with them. Start picturing what it would feel like to be them. Like picture what it feels like to be in their body energetically. What does that feel like? How do they see things? It'll help you get connected energetically with them. How does it feel to be them? How does it feel to live in the house that you live in and see what they see out the window? Or how do they see you? Just from their perspective. That's another really great, simple way to just start becoming more sensitive. You can do that with the animals in the backyard, in your backyard too, very simply. But then, the other thing you can do is, if you're going through the heart and you're doing that exercise we talked about, you can start by giving them messages is much easier than receiving, because we get in our heads and we get all funny about it. So that's a way that you can start sending them messages. So let's say you're going to the vet, something really simple like that, and you're trying to prepare them, and you're also trying to prepare yourself. And so you connect with that heart energy, and then you start sending them pictures of going to the vet, but you see it very calm. You want to make sure you don't infuse your own emotional feelings that you have about the vet. So, you're calmly driving. It's calm there. People are lovely. It's beautiful. It's an easy visit. There's no chaos, that kind of thing. And then you drive home and everything's good. So that's a really simple way to start sending messages. Or I'm going out of town. You can do the same thing. You can start sending them pictures about that you're leaving, and you'll be gone. Animals obviously don't quite understand the day concept. I can't say, okay, in 10 days they'll be back. But you can put out there the energy of night, day, night, day, night, day, to show them the feeling of it several days. So the same thing. And then if you want to start receiving messages, that just means that you have to stay in your heart and you have to trust. So, and it takes some practice because, you know, it's the creative part of our brain. And a lot of us have, remember how I said I needed the healer to help me kind of open that third eye again because I wasn't using it. So it's like a muscle, right? And so it atrophies. So it takes some practice trying to build that up, but you'll get better just by sending messages. That'll be really helpful. And then you can ask them something and then you just wait for a response. Ask them something very simple, not complex. How do you feel about your food if you want? Or, are you okay with this person as your pet sitter or, whatever. And then notice how you feel in your body. These messages come through that they can feel very much like us, but you can tell it's different. It's not exactly you. And that whatever message comes through should feel expanded in your body, not contracted, because that means that you're open to receiving.
And if it's contracted, it's usually your own stuff. Because I found that anything that comes into me telepathically is very expanded. It comes in like a whisper.
Yeah.
And I'll forget it if it comes in really softly. There's no judgment to it. I think the biggest thing for us humans is to really believe that it's real.
Yes.
Is to believe that we're really getting these messages. And if we can,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's a huge lesson to learn. And it's something that I'm now at a point where I know, I absolutely know if it's something coming through to me telepathically. Do animals have PTSD?
They can take on things like that. And remember I said in the beginning how I find when they take that on, it's quite a complex process. They'll take that on to help a human or a group of humans or whatever it might be, deal with their own. So, oftentimes if we get a rescue, because rescues, tend to have more of that, and they've chosen us, this rescue that has some PTSD, some really strong anxiety, almost 100% of the time, that human has something very similar going on, and they need to acknowledge it and work on it. And that animal has come in to give them that gift. So not only to recognize it, but also to say, see, it's okay. You still love me, even though I have this. So we'll work on this together. So let's work on this together. So it's amazing how that works. And if it's not that they have it, let's say they don't have that, then it's always the opposite, which is they need to learn patience or loving kindness or something like that. So it's one or the other. When they come in with trauma, that's how it is.
So, the image I keep getting, Kathy, is you've seen, so many photos of this, like a soldier who dies and then his dog is laying on the gravesite and won't leave in mourning. So do they mourn, or what is that relationship?
Yeah, they mourn. They can have feelings like that. They can move quicker through that than we can, just because they're so connected. And remember, that dog can connect with that human on the other side very easily, and most likely knows everything that happened, because they can. Because again, they're incredible psychic beings. So a lot of times it's mirroring the other humans around them who are deep in grief. And I hear that so often with people I talk to most of the time it's around another pet who's crossed over, and they say they're really sad. And I say, yeah, but more than that, what I feel is they're picking up your loss and your grief. So, again, they're incredible sponges and mirrors and showing us about our own grief.
They also can lower our blood pressure. They can lower our cholesterol. It's unconditional love. I heard that cats can, if you're a cat owner, you're less likely to have a stroke. I mean, it's just incredible. They're and just holding them, that warmth, it just, for some people who don't really get attention in their lives, or maybe hugs even, it's a lifeline. It's a way to feel love, because some people just don't have that in their life.
Right. And those beings can love you in a way far beyond any human can, because it's so unconditional. And they're very aware of that. They know. And yeah, it's their vibration. That's how they can be such healers. So like I can hug my dog Holly and I can feel the vibration just like I would hug a tree. It feels the same. I'm just feeling that love transfer happening, and how beautiful that is, and how they want to help in that way. She loves helping me in that way.
Oh, well, it's incredible. I wanted to tell you that before we did this interview, I like to ground and I go out in nature, and I'm known as the squirrel whisperer in my family. And even when I go in my car, my daughter programmed it. It says, "Hello, squirrel whisperer."
Oh, I love that.
It's so much fun. But I had a squirrel, a wild squirrel, Fred, who lost part of his tail. And he used to come and just grab nuts out of my hand and kind of he was ornery and he'd get in fights all the time, but he was just a buddy. And I'd call him and he'd come. Well, today, right before this interview, I went outside and I found this is so weird, a piece of a squirrel's tail. Like, they detach so the squirrel doesn't get harmed by it. It's a mechanism that they're built with. And so the squirrel who lost that part of the tail is fine. But I looked at that, I said, well, this is so interesting. And then I thought, Fred, it was almost like a sign from Fred, who gave me so much joy and just said, this is joyful for you. This is going to be a joyful experience getting into this interview with Kathy. I always look for signs. I'm a big believer in signs.
Yeah.
And are there signs that you could say with an animal, especially an animal who's transitioned, that people should be aware of? Signs? I know it'd be individual for each pet, but there might be some universal things, like the shadow that walks around the corner in the house.
Yeah. So for those animals who crossed over and the signs that it can be, they'll find the way that what you need, but it's things like you hear their name over and over again, simple things like that. It could be the energy. It could be a light twinging somewhere, somebody's got a reflector. It could be another animal that has their same name. It could be endless. It is hard to kind of generalize, because
it would be so specific to the
animal. It is.
But I do think hearing the name over and over, because that has happened, where all of a sudden you hear your dog's name, and I think that's a way of them. They're probably a way for them to be communicating with you, for sure.
Oh, without a doubt. Did that happen with?
Yes, and
he's quite happy right now, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
He's barking. Well, he's come in quite a bit, actually. I haven't seen him.
Has? Oh my God, you're gonna make me cry.
Yeah.
I do feel him a lot, and we have this bandana that he used to wear is in the kitchen. And I'll go by in the morning. I'll just give it a little kiss and go, "Good morning, George." He's just special, but all our pets are special. He was just special for us. But you also, this is a lovely thing that you do. I got a book from you, a book you wrote, and then you inscribed it with a message from George, and people can, say send you a photo of their pet, and then you inscribe it with a message from them. What a gorgeous gift that is.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. It can be really amazing. And the animals love to, say whatever they want to say through those words. So I love being able to offer that to people who really resonate with that. And yeah. Did you like the message? I have no idea.
Of course I did. I mean, it was just beautiful. It's loving and it's beautiful. And yeah, I so appreciate that. But I want people to know that they can do that they can get that.
Yeah.
It's probably the best gift you could give anybody. So if they're a pet lover. So
yeah, and especially if they've crossed over, or if, especially if they're crossed over, it's an amazing gift. But also, just if you want to start, if you're curious about learning a little bit more about your animal and maybe how they're helping you, because usually that'll come out in a, I have no control over what they say. So I've heard different things over the years, like, oh, I thought I told you, I ordered your book, Kathy, and I got 3, someone ordered 3, I think, animals, and because they had 3 dogs. And she said, oh, I thought I told you all that, and that's why you wrote it in the book. And I said, no. So they were related, the dogs were related, and I didn't know that. But they were like, we love being a family. I don't remember what they said, but something around that. And so they'll get through, however they need to get it through, they'll say it.
Is there a story that you remember that sort of has stuck in your head about a message that you got from an animal that was profound or funny or kind of off the wall?
Well, they can be very funny, and I love that part of that they can have such different personalities, and those personalities tend to match the humans. This wasn't about the book, but this was just a message I got from 2 animals the other day from them, and I thought this was profound and a really great way to talk about things, about how they help. So I had this client, and they were talking about their 2 animals. Their 2 animals actually that had crossed over not that long ago, a cat and a dog. And what the cat and the dog shared was that they worked in tandem together, which is common. And when this couple, when they would have a little conflict with one another, and maybe got a little heated, just a little bit, the dog would go to one, the cat would go to the other, and the dog would put his paw right on the woman's heart. The cat would go over to the other partner, grab the sleeve of the other partner, pull on it. And they thought that it was because they were upsetting their animal. And what the animals told me was, no, we're trying to diffuse everything. We're trying to remind you to go in your heart, cool off, breathe a little bit. And the animals just said, no, we were trying to help you. They just kind of say it off the cuff. So, yeah.
That's a great story. And actually they were helping because they were taking the couple out of the energy of that fight. And they're focusing on the animals. Oh,
right.
I think that's incredible. I do. Kathy, I know some people, and this has happened with myself, that I want so desperately to communicate with my animal that has passed that I can't reach them. Is there something I'm doing wrong?
Oh gosh, you're not doing anything wrong. And your animal, I guarantee, wants to get through to you. But what happens so often is you're so deep in grief and guilt is the thing that really gets in the way. So if we've got a lot of guilt about, did we make the right decision? Did we make the right timing call? Why didn't we see their illness before? Any of those things, or maybe we feel we didn't give them a good enough life, or any of those things that can come up for us, that can really get in the way of us receiving their messages. So it's not that they're not trying to get them through, they are, but it's difficult to receive those messages because our vibration is it's in a lower state. And so these animals, have a very high frequency as after they passed over. So it's difficult to connect those 2 vibrations together. So one of the big messages I think that people need to hear is, please remember that whether it doesn't matter when you made the call at the right time. Or if you didn't see the illness, it's okay. You weren't supposed to see it. A lot of times animals spare us of that. They don't want us to worry. They'll keep it from us, in fact, sometimes till the very end, because they don't want us to worry and they know that's not helpful. So it's just to remember to let go of that guilt. We don't need it. They are not judging us. They still love you. I guarantee it, 100%. They still love you. So if we can get in that state, and the grief's okay, we have to feel it. But, it's those times when we are quiet and we allow, and we're not trying to get the message to come through. We just need to allow it. So, that can happen when we're drifting off to sleep, right? When we're drifting off to sleep, because our psychic, abilities really open then. And, you feel them, or maybe you see them in your dreams. Those are all signs from your animal. So you just don't need to try as hard. Just let it go and let it come in, and trust that they are messages from your animal.
Wonderful, wonderful advice. Trust. I find that word pops up a lot. We just have to really trust in our intuition.
We do.
Kathy, I wanted to ask you, is there anything else that you want to share? Because I think we're coming to the end of this, which I could talk to you for hours and hours about this topic. And I have some questions that I kind of ask everybody, but is there anything else that you want to share about our pets, and especially about fear when we're fearful? What is the best way to communicate with our pets, and how can they help us in those states?
Well, one of the best things to remember is what we've already talked about. And it's something that's difficult to remember because we've been so conditioned to believe our animals are so much like us. They have the same exact feelings that we do. But just to remember that most of it's our fears, our own things, our own stuff. And so to remember your animal is beautifully and full of love, trying to remind you of and help you see this own fear that you have, and to remind you to get out of that vibration and to transform it and live back in a higher vibration, back to love, go back to love. And so that's, I think the biggest thing that we can remember is to just start noticing those parallels. How does that work together? Because I've heard from so many animals on a daily basis how desperately they want the humans to understand that. Such a big thing.
It makes me think of when people have near-death experiences and they go to these other spaces, and it's about 100% of the time, pretty close, where people come back, or they don't want to come back, but when they do, they say the answer to life is love. I mean, the secret to life is love. And I do believe that. I love and be loved. And our animals are already built that way.
Yeah.
And they're living in the present moment, which is so beautiful, which we struggle with.
Well, they don't have egos. So that's why it's easier. That's why.
Yeah. And that's a really good point, because it's our human ego that gets in our way. And I think that's why it's unconditional love, because you can come home from work late and your dog's going to wag his tail even harder, and be more excited to see you. Right. And you're not going to get reprimanded for getting home late.
No.
It's such an exquisite relationship and such a treasured, and it's so special. And one to be honored with our pets and with animals in general, because I do love my wildlife, and I talk to the crows and I talk to the squirrels, and I have a hummingbird that her name is Flora. She's all green. I call her Flora. And I literally walk out the door in the morning and I'll just say, "Hey, Flora, come on, Flora." And she comes and she sits on my finger, and I have a little feeder. So it's, of course the food is there. But even when the food's not there, she's right there in my face. And I marvel at it because is she responding to my calling her? Because that's like, you call your domesticated animal to you, but Flora will come and she's just very special.
I love that story for so many reasons. And one of the reasons is because there are so many humans who befriend animals in the wild. And what we forget, and what you've already learned, Sandi, and is that it might be, well, they're coming for the food. We say that, right? Or whatever. And we're taking care of them, and we're so worried about them. But if you talk to them, the answer would be the same as with the pet. Well, I'm coming to support you. I'm coming here to help you. I'm coming here to give you love. So Flora is giving you love, and Flora is reminding you about joy. And Flora, is just reminding you what I'm hearing her right now, what a beautiful human being you are. And to remember how, connecting with your heart and can bring so much to you. So Flora's just delighted by you, and it's just one of her favorite things to do is to come and see you, and she just loves it.
Oh my gosh,
so fun.
Kathy, I love her so much, and I will go outside. I'll say to my family, okay, I need Flora right now because I'm a little anxious, right? Or something. I need Flora, and she'll come running or flying to me, and her little feet on my finger, oh my gosh, and her wings, that beautiful hummingbird when she flutters her wings, it's magic. It's pure magic, and she brings me tremendous joy. Yep. And I hope I do the same for her. So
she already said that.
That's beautiful. Kathy, that's beautiful. Okay, I have a few questions that I like to ask all my guests, and one of them is there something that you want to do but fear is holding you back? And it can be with anything.
I have to think about that for a second. It flies into my head, which is really interesting. And it's not fear. It's actually just, it's not, well, you could say it was fear. It's not fear like I'm afraid of horses, but I would love to get good at horseback riding. And it's not like I've ever ridden horses before. I have, but I've never done that on a, regular basis. And so it's not a fear. It's just kind of like a little block, like, you don't have time for that or whatever. So, that's interesting that popped in my head as soon as you asked that.
The reason I asked that question, I think if we get it out there, we can maybe vaporize the fear a little bit. But Kathy, I have the exact same one. I want to go galloping. Yeah. And I've ridden horses, but I want to just go galloping on a horse. And that's really interesting.
Wow.
Yes, that's fun. What is your synchronicities? So many. What is your go-to method or strategy that you use to alleviate any fear or anxiety that you might have?
Well, my animals help me a ton on that for starters. So while I don't, like we talked about before, I don't want them to be taking on my anxiety, fear, lower frequency energy. I do allow them to help me with it when they want to. So that's a wonderful thing. I'll chat with them about wisdom because they have wisdom to share, like total wisdom to share. And it's profound and amazing wisdom. But I also do lots of healing techniques too, separate from the animals so that I can spare them a lot of energetic. So I do deep breathing. I use a lot of violet, from the crown chakra. Release a lot of that energy to transform. I fill up with love a lot. Just lots of deep breathing. Music helps me really relaxing, beautiful music can help me. Nature is another beautiful way, just like that. I think for all of us sensitives, it's a must. We all need that, and so I certainly do. I sit in our backyard sometimes and talk to the birds and the squirrels, and it's amazing.
I think you're my soul sister because I do the same thing. And people don't think it's weird anymore. I mean, that's just what I do.
No, yeah, and I think we've evolved enough, as humans. I think that it's a little more normalized now, but yeah,
Without a doubt. I mean, doing this podcast now, 10 years ago, I probably would have been fearful to do it. And now it's much more talking about metaphysics, and it's much more widely accepted, which is it's a beautiful thing. Beautiful
it
thing.
is. Yeah, so many more people open, and yeah, it's open. Openness is all you really need.
Exactly. What do you think our purpose is on this planet?
As human beings? Well, we've got lessons to learn, don't we? Lots of them. We're learning about choosing love. And that's how the animals integrate into that so well, is that they already know that. And so what a beautiful thing for me to be able to work with them every day and be reminded of that. Choose love.
They're the perfect teachers, aren't they?
Yeah.
And what do you consider a successful life?
Oh, one that is aligned with the heart and putting your energy where your heart wants it to go.
There's a running theme here, isn't there?
Yes, there is. Yeah.
Love and heart. Absolutely. And then finish the sentence for me. In the past, I was, and now I am.
I would have to say in the past, this has been a while, but quite a few years ago, but I didn't embrace lessons. I didn't understand that. And now I see them as a gift, and that challenges and lessons that come in are such amazing learning opportunities and choosing opportunities. And I'm grateful for them.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Kathy, it has been a pure joy and honor to be talking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time, talking about our animal friends. There's much more to talk about,
I know there,
but
thank you. Sorry. Thank you so much. It was my pleasure. This has been a beautiful conversation.
Oh, it has for me too. And until we meet again, because we will, sending you lots and lots of love, and thanks so much for being on Fear Unzipped.
Thank you, Sandi. Sending you lots of love back. Bye-bye.